And this is the movie Descent into the Abyss. Ordinary miners find an ancient tomb deep underground. Trapped under a stone trap collapsed 1,000 meters deep, the workers begin to suspect that this is not a tomb, but a prison for something truly horrific. The film action begins in 1856. Inside a coal mine, a worker, occupied mining minerals, and have a special bird with them that can first sense a gas leak. To alleviate the work, the miners sing a chorus song, which helps not only to build and live, but also to swing a pickaxe. The miner, having pierced a hole in the wall, notices that the bird has stopped singing. The command "gas" is heard by everyone. Workers retreat from the tunnel, unaware of the gas they call an old wise miner, covered in coal dust from digging. He crawls into the tunnel where he lights a candle on a special elongated stick and checks. The presence of gas deep within the cave, however, instead, he notices an incredibly clawed paw, drops the candle, and runs away in terror. Gas immediately floods into the mine, followed by an explosion. We move to Morocco in 1956, where a young man, Amir, and his friend are riding in the back of a truck to a hiring station where the head of the mine is recruiting new workers. This is a great opportunity for the locals to improve their fortunes. The applicants are lined up in the courtyard, ordered to strip so the recruiter can assess their physical condition. Status and position in society mean nothing here. The men are marked with different colors by the workers, with red for rejected and green for accepted. Amir's friend is given a red mark due to his coughing, while Amir is also given a red mark. However, his audacious nature and desperate financial situation pushes him to grab the stamp and mark himself with green. Impressed by Amir's boldness, the recruiter agrees to hire him and brands his forehead with a stamp. At this time, Professor Berthier, a scientist, arrives at the mine. He moves among the workers, trying to find the manager's office. However, the manager finds Berthier and escorts him to his office within the mining company's facilities. A professor came to get soil samples from a 1,000-meter deep expedition, but it'll take the miners 2 weeks to dig a passage there. The scientist is in a rush, so he offers the manager a bribe, money in an envelope, to speed up the process. He agrees, but it still won't be done sooner than a week. An alarm rings and a wounded man is brought up from the mine. The managers and Berthier rush to the elevator. The nurses receive a wounded man with an injured leg, pulled from the rubble by foreman Roland. The professor insists that he lead the expedition. The manager Roland into his office to explain the task: escort the tourist. He puts the money received from the scientist on the table as a bonus for the workers. Foreman reluctantly agrees. He assigns Amir to his crew in place of the injured man, who meets his colleagues in the locker room. Before the first descent into the coalface, Roland gives a short lecture to the newcomer. He assigns the wily Louis to watch over him. When the lantern's lamp burns out by the floor, they send a young man to replace it. Wandering through the corridors, he stumbles upon a colleague and a white horse, a creature that also toils in the mine. Likewise, it works in the mine. At lunchtime, Roland spots the newcomer's cheese and points out that a rat has already found its way into his bag and bitten the food. Miners are friendly with the rodents, as they act as canaries, warning against danger. After giving the spoiled cheese to the rat, the foreman advises the newcomer to hang his bag higher and offers him an apple for a snack. This is how the first day at a new job goes by. Amir barely has the energy to shower afterwards. On the next shift, Professor Berthier joins them, holding a diary to write in and a camera with a flash to document their fascinating journey to the center of the Earth. Through narrow, dark corridors, they reach a point where the miner will plant explosives to blast their way down to the required depth. After blasting a hole, the men look into it. Roland doesn't like that the professor is hiding information. He has a map of the lower tunnels. The foreman throws the diary into the hole, forcing the scientist to descend the rope first. In addition to the book, there are ancient man-made tunnels. When the rest of the miners climb down, the foreman tells stories about how 100 years ago, an entire brigade perished here. A fire broke out. They could not escape. Their bodies were never found. The passage to the lower floor was filled in and no one has come down here since. Looking around, Professor Berthier separates from the group. Noticing he is missing, Roland tells them to search lest they lose track of a tourist. Wandering through the corridors, the workers examine the smooth walls built with expertise. Reaching a fork in the road, they divide into two groups. Amir goes with Louis and Santini. They find the remains of one of the deceased miners. Despite the novice's pleas, the colleagues loot the skeleton for useful goods. In a hand with crushed bones, they find a strangely shaped stone, which they take with them. The world notices writing smeared with blood on the wall, telling of some creature lurking in the darkness. The reading is interrupted by Louise playing with the skeleton. The trio continues their search for the professor, but come across their other colleagues. They're observing the flashes of a camera. Berthier understands something is ahead. An irritated Roland sneaks up behind him and applies a chokehold to get his attention and explain a simple truth. Underground, he's in charge and won't tolerate disobedience. The world notices inscriptions on the walls in an ancient language, which pique his curiosity. According to the scientist, the true purpose of his visit is behind the wall. He asks the miners to break through it, to which Roland reluctantly agrees, after first clarifying whether there is anything dangerous behind it. The miner lays dynamite on duty, and after a few days, a passage materializes in the wall. The miners find themselves in a hall with stone columns, hidden with mysterious inscriptions. The professor, with Amir's help, takes samples of the materials, believing that they are thousands of years old. Inspecting the premises, the workers stumble upon many human remains. Skeletons lie on the floor, interspersed with ancient weapons and shields. Swords fall apart in your hands from dilapidation. Most likely it's a tomb. On a stone pedestal, there is a black sarcophagus with long ones carved out of stone, hands and a huge head. Th believes that this creature was revered as a deity in antiquity, but the pragmatic Roland does not like to be in the crypt. After gathering the men, they go to the hole, where the engineer has already built a wooden descent and even led a horse through it. The animal suddenly begins to behave strangely, runs away into the darkness as if frightened by something. Whether the horse smelled something or from the sound of its hooves, cracks suddenly started to form on the walls, causing their collapse. The sling with the rescue hole falls down. A wooden bridge drops on Santini's legs, breaking them. The evening ceases to be calm, causing the brigadier to lose his nerves. He blames the professor for what happened, but the facts prove he had nothing to do with it. While they are setting the wounded man's bones, Mira is sent to find the left-behind workers. He locates Luis and Polo in the crypt, where they are trying to open the tomb, but they achieve nothing. Mira notices a peculiar hole on the coffin's lid and tries the stone he found earlier on it. The quest item activates and the locks holding it shut open. Miners push the lid down. Inside, not only is a body covered by a shroud seen, but also a handful of precious stones. They fill their pockets with them. When Mira wants to leave, Luis attacks him, threatening to kill him if he tells anyone. The frightened newcomer flees, while Luis urinates on the skeletons of ancient warriors. Pola divides the stones into several parts, not forgetting about the share of the wounded comrade who won't be able to work anytime soon. Luis lights up, regardless of Paul's warnings that there might be flammable gas here. While not yet sharing the loot, a hand comes out of the grave. With incredibly long fingers, the lying creature rises, attracting the attention of the novice Lara Crofts, following which a raucous noise can be heard down the corridor. Scared grave robbers run together towards the rest of the brigade. The injured engineer points to the floor, then long fingers appear behind him, gripping the man, and the creature incredibly quickly drags him into the darkness. The brigade pursues their companion. They discover a dropped bag with a bloody trail that leads to a hanged, decapitated body with a torn open stomach just a minute ago by the floor. Next, a lagging professor arrives. An angry miner blames him for what occurred. Curiously, Roland asks what he knows. Berthier says they're dealing with traces of an unknown ancient civilization that offered human sacrifices to God from a sarcophagus. The sarcophagus itself turned out to be even more ancient. Amir suggests this isn't a burial ground, but a prison. He suggests they should return to the rubble to avoid encountering the monster. Suddenly, Luis remembers that the wounded Santini is alone, and the workers are fleeing. On the way back, Santini uses the professor's camera to illuminate the long hallway. At some point, a monster appears in the darkness and grabs the man. His colleagues stumble upon a monster in the hallway holding a prisoner with several hands at once. The monster rakes Santini with its claws, then disappears into the darkness. The miner dies in the foreman's arms. The survivors decide that the unknown creature needs to be trapped. They decide to use the remaining dynamite for the attack. The miners return to the lair where they are, coffin bedroom. Professor Berthier examines the inscriptions on the columns, trying to comprehend the history of what's unfolding. Amir shows his linguistic skills and assists him. They figure out how to navigate the maze of corridors to find an exit. The brigade follows the scientist's directions, but instead of finding an exit, they discover a dungeon filled with skeletons. Berthier theorizes that these might be volunteers who willingly became victims. They continue, encountering fresh blood on the cell walls. A blood trail leads scientist Jamir to a room where the escapee is located. A horse with a ripped belly. Using the opportunity that the rest of the miners are behind, Berthier pulls the lever, blocking the passage with a massive stone. He explains to Amir that the proletariat wants to kill him for starting the expedition. While the miners are trying to roll away the stone, the professor studies the graffiti on the walls. He concludes that the monster is not just an evil entity, but a harbinger of even greater evil, namely the awakening of the sleeper Tulhu, whose arrival was warned about by the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazred. Just as they are about to leave, the carcass of the horse starts to move, and from the intestinal depths rises not DiCaprio, who spent the night there, but a monster. Berthier tells the young man not to move, and he heads towards the monster, expressing his admiration aloud. The professor hugs the monster, but the monster snaps his bones in return, and people panic and run to the blocked exit. The miners working on the other side barely have time to roll the stone to save him, and he himself barely manages to retrieve the scientist's diary. Amir, the adrenaline pumping, accuses Luis of threatening the professor. Moreover, the lad discusses about the tombs, which initiated their ill-fated circumstance. Upon inspecting his underling's bag, Roland narrowly beats him up and confiscates the jewels to return them to the kin of the deceased, while Amir guides them further into the hallways, searching for an exit while referring to the late Berthie's notes. As they approach a junction, they hear peculiar noises and switch off the lights to remain undetected. Emerging from their surroundings is a stilt-walking creature who slashes a miner's throat and drags his body away as Amir panics and runs off. The lad takes shadow around a bend where he's discovered by Amir. Together with the boss, they attempt to find a way out. En route, Amir clarifies that running away isn't an option. They must halt the creature from escaping and inducing global catastrophe. However, the boss does not express concern for that. He only seeks self-preservation. Clues lead them to a chamber with the remains of miners trapped a century ago. A journal lies added to the heap nearby. Per its contents, a vertical shaft exists somewhere where sacrifices were made for the creature and that they could escape through. Amir realizes that the clues should be read in the Arabic tradition, from right to left. They are about to go, but the monster's paw grabs Amir's leg and drags him into the darkness. Left alone, Roland heads towards the exit, finding a shaft with a huge pile of bones and climbs them to the exit, and ends up in a strange ancient structure full of tombs. He makes it to the throne room, where the bones of the victims are smoldering on a lava pyre. Here, a creature sits on the throne using Luis's severed head to speak to the young man. The monster wants Amir to help him get out. In exchange, he'll endow him with the power of God. Realizing that in this way, humanity will be stuck with a furry polar creature. The world pretends to want to hug him, but instead stabs him in the leg with an earlier found spearhead. The guy makes a run for it. He manages to run through the corridors to the infamous shaft where the victims were dumped. The world tries to crawl into the hole from where Roland's hand is coming down. The brigadier was waiting for him, mining the manhole. They crawl towards the exit as a disgusting creature approaches from behind. Roland prepares to pass. When the monster gets to the checker, only then he realizes that he left the detonator key down below in a crevice with the explosives. Crawling second, Amir descends with the detonator to pick up the key and trigger the device, fully knowing that he won't make it to a safe height in time. The young man inserts the key and anxiously winds it up before the monster reaches him. Suddenly, the brigadier's hand lands on his shoulder. Roland also descended. Together they arm the detonators, and when the monster reaches the speaker, they trigger it. An explosion reverberates in the mine, and the movie concludes.